Welcome into week 6 and episode 6 of Hail to the Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Justice. Joined by me, as always, is my co-host, Daniel Dash. We are presented by the Wolverine Lounge and brought to you by Big Heads Media. Michigan plays Iowa this week, coming off a demolition derby of Rutgers. Dash, my friend, how are we today?
It's been a busy week. Real busy week. What about you?
Well, I didn't go to Chicago and back like you did.
I went to Chicago and back.
And got face-to-face time with Juwan Howard, of all people, which, from what I hear, is a pretty important guy.
Foot-to-foot time, too. I have a picture of my dress shoe directly next to his dress shoe. We did a Twitter poll for the Michigan Daily road trips in the car. 56% of responses thought that my foot is bigger. But truthfully, we're both size 17 shoes.
I'm glad you got the facts in.
Hey, I'm not going to twist my words on the podcast.
Oh, God. All right, well, let's briefly touch on Rutgers. As we said last week, Rutgers is Rutgers. They didn't know, as we predicted, they didn't know a whole lot of what to do with a football.
Yes, this is why they have thesaurus.com. You type in bad, and your 3 dozen results are synonyms for Rutgers.
Yeah, absolutely. And their coach didn't make it back to the bus. Chris
Nope.
Ash.
No.
Hate to make fun of guys who are no longer with a job. However, don't care because his buyout was $8 million.
Yep.
So,
hey, fantastic headline in the Michigan Daily on Monday. Ash kicking.
yeah,
the
that's
game.
pretty solid. I ain't gonna lie. Who are we shouting out there? Is that Max or is that Teo?
That's going to be your Jack Silberman, Max Markovich, Ethan Sears trio.
Okay. Totally forgot about
working on
Sears,
Sports Monday. Yeah.
who is the elite of the group there, I would say. No offense.
They are all elite.
Teo, man. I don't know about Teo. Former Wolverine Lounger, Teo.
Got rid of him in time.
So Rutgers. All right, let's briefly talk about it. It's Rutgers, so there's not a whole lot to take away, but here's what I took away from it. And I know usually we really dive into the game before, but you and I were talking pre-show. Well, there's really not a whole lot to talk about. It's a week or 6 days after the game now, and there's what can be deemed from that game is more than what I think people are giving it credit for. But in that same vein, I think it can all be summed up pretty quickly. So what I took away from it was Michigan's offense found rhythm, whether it be against Rutgers or whomever. They had no rhythm against Middle Tennessee State in the second half. They had no rhythm against Army for all 6 quarters.
Yeah.
So I think against any team you can take away something and when this offense finds rhythm, and I think they did that. And I think the target share was fair. For the first time this season, the target share seemed fair. I do want to see more from Tariq Black, but when you got Ronnie Bell making the plays he's making, it's hard to throw the ball to anybody besides him and Nico, and occasionally here and there Eubanks and whomever else that can get out there, and obviously Peoples-Jones. So I think the target share was fair. I think the offense was in rhythm. Defensively, the pass rush was there.
Kwity Paye was a man on a mission.
Finally, my preseason pick. No offense, Kwity, if you're listening, not to disdain your first 3 weeks, but thank you for proving my preseason week 1 pick as defensive MVP. He keeps that up. He will make a name for himself and continue to make a name for himself as one of the Big Ten's elite defensive ends. So that's what I took away from Rutgers. 3 quick points from Rutgers. The defense, I think the secondary is still good. I think Dax Hill is very good. I think Cam McGrone is very good, and we touched on that at the Wolverine Lounge, specifically you did. Good write-up there if you want to go check that out. Still very relevant a few days later.
We'll get into why it's particularly relevant in a season-altering game for the Wolverines this weekend pretty soon.
So those are 2 things that I took away, and I would say the third thing is just the offensive rhythm. So that's what I took away from the Rutgers game. How about you?
Yeah, to piggyback on your offensive rhythm comment there at the end, I think Gaddis moving down to the sideline has a really, really big impact on that. I think everything just feels more personal when you're talking to him face-to-face. I think there's a lot that goes on when a player has to put on a headset to talk to their coordinator who's sitting in a box. I just think that having the passion that Gaddis has, that belongs on the sideline. That's a guy who's going to make a positive impact on any football staff he's a part of from the sideline. And I think you saw it reflected in the players. I think just Shea looked comfortable. These receivers were making plays. I mean, granted, you have the caveat that it's Rutgers, but that doesn't completely wipe away any significance of their production and their numbers. And just the way they moved the ball with ease when they were in rhythm. So defensively, I think that Cam McGrone showed elite speed. Is he Devin Bush? No. Will he be Devin Bush? No. Does he have elite speed? Yes. So we need to stop comparing him to Devin Bush because, I mean, there's a guy who's only in his second year on the program and, quite frankly, just put out a game that really made him look like a poised senior. I think we're going to see big things from him going forward, especially with some linebacker injury news that we've got coming later on the show. Back in the secondary, you touched on it. Dax Hill made some plays. His most electric play of the game came on special teams. As a gunner, ran down. Rutgers punt returner fielded the ball out of bounds, and Dax lit him up. I think that's something that, quite frankly, he came in with a pop and a bang. So that's really what I saw. I think really, if you had to single out a negative, you'd be hard-pressed to find one. I mean, you could always circle the run game, but with the way they were throwing the ball, why run it?
This offense has always been, by design, one that is supposed to be, when it's in its most pure form, it's supposed to set up the run via the pass, not vice versa. And although we didn't see that at Wisconsin in either way, that's what they were trying to do. They passed in the first 4 first downs of the game. They did that very much so against Rutgers. The only game we really did not see them do that was Army. Even Middle Tennessee State in the first half, that was a lot of what you saw.
Yeah.
And so I think that's going to continue because Shea Patterson, again, considering the opponent and all, had quite the game to showcase, okay, hey, I'm still here. I can still do this. I can still make throws. He made good throws and good coverage at times. He had wide open guys too. And I think it was also the first time that we really saw the quote-unquote speed in space, not to the fullest extent, but you really did see a lot of guys catching the ball and gaining at least 4 to 6 after the catch. And then you saw sometimes, obviously, Nico Collins, he had what? I think that was like a 35-yarder after
48.
the catch, 48. It was a 48-yard touchdown, but it was about 35 after catch, you know.
Eric All laid the boom down the sideline.
Yeah. That guy wasn't tackling him either way, but shout out
he
to
pretty
Eric
much
All,
got tackled.
Right. So, yeah, I think the speed in space was displayed a little bit in the Rutgers game, and people are quick to say it's Rutgers, so I won't really put them on a pedestal for that. But regardless, as a Michigan fan, you should be encouraged by just the designs in general in that game. Will they work against Iowa? Will they work against the rivals? Will they work in the big landscape of things, in the big picture? That's still to be seen. You know, that's yet to be determined. But you can't just X off that game and say it doesn't matter because it was Rutgers. I mean, it was a step in the right direction.
Right.
They shut a team out for the first time since 2016, which was also Rutgers, but
people listening remember that day fondly.
So, but let's move on from Rutgers. That's the game. 52-0.
One more quick note on Rutgers. That is Monday presser. Jim Harbaugh, just real quick, said that he thought for the first time all year the offensive line looked cohesive. Thought they played like a unit, blocked like a unit. It wasn't 5 individuals up there. Rather, he saw one offensive line. So that's for a lot of people out there worried about the O-line. That should be a nice takeaway from last Saturday.
So let's talk a little bit of inside intel, and we try to bring this to you guys each week. Some weeks it's just not worth it. There's not a whole lot to touch on compared to others, so we do dive into it a bit. But this week there is some good nuggets out there. We appreciate if you didn't go out there and put these things out on Twitter and all of that. This is podcast material. It's kind of in the middle of the show for a reason. Obviously, you come here to hear these insights, so honestly, what you do with it is what you do with it. We're not going to get mad at you, but, we would just appreciate it if you kept it internal.
Yeah.
So expect Dax Hill to be out there first play, at least when they go out there in the nickel. Don't expect to see Josh Ross. McCaffrey likely out again. Expect to see less Jordan Glasgow, more of a role situation such as blitzes, etc. I think
not covering crossing routes.
I think that the coaches saw what you guys saw. Michigan Twitter. I think they saw what you guys saw, but I'm just a guy. Expect to see more and more Cam McGrone. I think he's starting to become the anchor of the middle, especially with his compadre Josh Ross out, which honestly opens up the question of what's going to happen there when Josh Ross comes back. I think Josh Ross will still command the middle, but I think putting Cam McGrone at the will or the Sam will be extremely beneficial because that'll give them two really solid linebackers.
Especially if McGrone keeps up on this trajectory and keeps blossoming, he could be ready for a legitimately expanded role by the time Ross is healthy.
Wouldn't expect to see Zach Charbonnet in that big of a workload again this week or in the distant future. I think there's something lingering there, and while he'll still play, especially in pass blocking situations where the rest of these running backs cannot excel for whatever reason, maybe True Wilson can. We haven't seen a lot of him just yet. Just kind of got the spark of him last week in his season debut. However, he might get 4 to 6 carries, maybe up the volume to 8 to 10.
Mm-hmm. Second game of the season.
But I wouldn't, Charbonnet-wise, I wouldn't expect much volume out of him this week. Christian Turner should continue to get that run. However, that being said, we're going to preview Iowa for you a little bit different than we do each week. We're going to have our first interview of the series.
An interview? Me or you?
This is episode 6, and we've finally decided that it's time to bring someone else in. So we had to spend the first 5 episodes building our chemistry, and I feel like we've gotten there now. And now we have to bring in someone to add to the salsa. We had tomato, and we had some peppers. Now we got some
salsa.
Chips?
Salsa
Chips?
I don't know if we have the chips yet. Chips are coming next week.
Chips are coming next week.
This is a very worthy guest, to say the least.
Joining us is going to be Scott Dochterman of The Athletic. He covers the Iowa Hawkeyes. Scott and I work together at a little old place known as Land of 10, and some of you guys might remember that establishment, no longer in action. However, Scott is a wonderful reporter who writes one heck of a story. You can find him on The Athletic. I'm sure you all are very aware of that website, and I don't need to guide you to any URLs there. Scott's going to dive in on some great insight and kind of take over for Eyes on the Enemy, which is usually Daniel's segment on the show, but Scott really dives in and shows you and talks to you about everything to expect from Iowa, everything from their secondary, which he thinks Michigan can exploit, to its defensive line, which is, while stout against the run, has struggled against the pass, despite the A.J. Epineza machine, whom only has 1 sack, and how their quarterback, Nate Stanley, will be the real challenge for Michigan offensively because of the time he'll have in the pocket due to Iowa's very strong offensive line, which seems to be an every year thing.
It's a Wisconsin-esque trend.
Exactly.
And all of this will happen as a tear rolls down my cheek.
So, as we go into that interview, we would like to let you know that we are now sponsored by the Action Network. We'll dive more into that during Hail to the Spread, but had to mention it before we get to this interview. Ladies and gentlemen, Scott Dochterman. And now we welcome on a very special guest from The Athletic. He covers the Iowa Hawkeyes. His name is Scott Dochterman. My man used to work together over at a company we will not name right now. Scott, my man, how are you?
I'm doing great, Brandon. It's good to talk to you after our lovely venture together a few years ago.
Scott, this game is it's going to be one that's really telling on the 2019 season for what could be both of these teams. However, Iowa is very much so in control of their own destiny, being undefeated and having not lost in their division. Whereas Michigan, with a conference loss, really need to win this game at home. It is homecoming against an Iowa team that it seems to be a little bit more athletic than. What is the comparison to what Michigan, who is pretty much in a do-or-die situation in this game, compared to that in Iowa City with an Iowa team that, like I said, still controls their own destiny?
Iowa has a different type of curve, year after year than Michigan and other teams like Michigan, because I think the critical mass of fans understand that you're not going to be competitive for the national title every year. They want to be, of course, and some groups of fans really get aggravated by it. But by and large, I think people understand that, some years you're not going to have it. Other years you might. Well, this is one of those years where they think they might. And because along the line of scrimmage, this is as good as they've been in a while, both sides of the line of scrimmage. Offensive line, 2 elite-level tackles, one from Detroit, and Alaric Jackson, and another one on the other side, Tristan Wirfs, who's projected as a top 5 NFL-type pick, and at center with Tyler Linderbaum, who's a freshman but is playing as well as I've ever seen at that level. So, and then you throw on a 3-year starting quarterback who has 60 career touchdowns, who's won in some environments, tough environments, and he's beaten Ohio State, beaten some other ranked teams. Mississippi State was a very good team last year. So I think this year, from this perspective over here, is that Iowa is capable of having a championship caliber team, and about every 4 to 5 years they get in that ballpark, and then you look at the Big Ten West, and there's always a great deal of respect, mutual respect between Iowa and Wisconsin, and they know kind of the mettle of their foe there. But all along, I felt like these were the two best teams in the West, and they've sure proven it, so far. So I think they're looking at this as an opportunity, a proving ground for them. Are they capable of being a championship caliber team? I think you'll find out on Saturday, and Saturday and next week against Penn State. Whereas I could see the desperation in some respects coming out of Ann Arbor with Michigan, that if you can't beat Iowa and you also still have to play Michigan State, Penn State, and Ohio State, this isn't going to be the year. And judging from kind of whether it's the pressure or the aggravation that fans have, I could see things slipping away very quickly if that doesn't happen on Saturday.
And Scott, you mentioned the tackle out of Detroit, Alaric Jackson, a guy who was not sent a letter of intent from Michigan, as some listeners of ours might remember who paid attention to recruiting back during that class. Something they might regret now, given that he has become such an elite draft prospect over the years at Iowa and might be feeding off guys like Kwity Paye and Aiden Hutchinson on Saturday. Moving forward and segueing into Kirk Ferentz and how he has become and always has been strict to his methods, strict to his ways, and never really budged on it. Well, meanwhile, Michigan and Jim Harbaugh are just trying to modernize their offense, something we didn't predict happening during his arrival here, or during his stint here, I should say. Talk about Kirk Ferentz, the strict ways to his methods, why it's never changed, and how that will be implemented on Saturday.
Yeah, I think you look first of all at Iowa, and Kirk Ferentz's 21st year at Iowa. There's been incredible stability here with Hayden Fry 20 years before Kirk, and they've kind of done things a similar way. I mean, Kirk looks at Iowa, and I call Iowa kind of one of the most self-aware programs in the country, because Iowa understands what it is. It understands what it wants to be. It has that identity, whereas other teams, and I think Michigan's probably in that ballpark right now, are still kind of searching for it. Well, Iowa knows that recruiting-wise, it's not going to win those fights. It's not going to go and get a 4 or 5-star wide receiver and beat Ohio State or Alabama or Michigan or whomever for them. But what Iowa knows it can do is it can go find 6'4", 290, and turn them into an elite level offensive lineman. Same thing on the defensive side of the ball. And if they can find tough, hard-nosed kids, develop them in the weight room, and I think they have definitely the highest paid strength coach, and in my opinion, probably the best, because they understand their developmental program, and they can't, in order to compete, they have to make sure that players in years 4 and 5 are able to compete against the more talented players. And by the time they have that grit and determination to get into that ballpark, that will win the day. And third and short, they'll be able to make those stops against more talented players. So that part of it, I think, has been, consistent. Sometimes the recruiting hasn't come up with them. Well, I think they're on a surge here. I think they've found some players in the last 3 to 4 years that fit that philosophy, and the results are on the field. They're at a better place than they were even the last time Iowa played Michigan in 2016. Now, offensively, they're a multiple style. They're a zone blocking team that likes to hit in space, very physical, but much different than what Wisconsin did, and really what Michigan did over the last few years, which was more pin and pulls, gap blocking. Iowa's a zone blocking team, and it's worked for them. Quarterback, they've got a strong-armed guy in Nate Stanley. You could see him with the winged helmets from 20, 30 years ago under Lloyd Carr, even Bo Schembechler. He's that style of quarterback. An Elvis Gerbach type is probably the best way to describe him. But probably the separator for this team and this program this year offensively is that they finally have some receivers who can get open in space, who can make moves, who can separate from defenders. And they have 4 of them. And in really 5, Oliver Martin is kind of played sparingly, and of course you guys know him very well. But he's still kind of being, pushed into the offense here and there. but they have 5 guys they're really confident in, and they're doing whatever it needs to be done in the passing game, and so I think when you look at that, that's been a kind of a revelation. It shows that Iowa can be multifaceted. They can push the ball down the field, and they can also run the ball effectively. So I think they're in a position and in a strength to where they like where they are offensively. And they have 4 running backs they like quite a bit. They've got 4 or 5 receivers. Their offensive line's strong. They got a veteran quarterback with a strong arm. So right now they're in a pretty solid position offensively. And I think on defense, they still run the 4-3, but this year it's a little more out of necessity. They've the one area where Michigan can attack Iowa is through their secondary, which is injury depleted, and they lost one of their best players to the NFL draft last year in Amani Hooker. So they can be attacked through the pass through the secondary. They've got a lot of injuries there. They tried to run with a 4-2-5. They've had to readapt to the 4-3 at least early on, and so that's one area where it's a little bit concerning for Iowa, and where they can be beaten, by a good team with plenty of time throwing the football.
We're talking with Scott Dochterman from The Athletic, covers the Hawkeyes for The Athletic, and you can follow him on Twitter at Scott Dochterman. That's with Dochtterman. Scott, a guy who is familiar with the Michigan program and our listeners are very familiar with, is Oliver Martin, who transferred from the Wolverines to the Hawkeyes over the summer. A guy whose process was extremely delayed, and I know for you guys as media, could not have been more inconvenient given that he was not deemed eligible until the final hour, really, and the final week before the season started. It is Michigan's homecoming, but for Oliver Martin, this is a little bit of his own. So could you tell us a little bit about Martin and his return to Ann Arbor?
Yeah, it's interesting all the way around. I mean, Oliver Martin, of course, for us locally, everybody knew him. I mean, for me personally, graduated with my son from the same high school, but it's just been so much drama associated with his career, from his college choice to then leaving, and then now whether or not he's going to come back, and then he came back, and then what's going on with the NCAA, that there's just been so much drama associated with it. It's almost nice to talk to him about football, and we had that opportunity a little bit early in the season, or in camp. He really would not discuss why he left Michigan. I have a feeling there just wasn't something that he liked, and a personal issue is what he tried to kind of classify it as. But then, his first game at Iowa, he caught a touchdown pass. He looks good when he's out there. I think he's still trying to get used to the offense a little bit, and having the other receivers around him that have played very well is really put it in a position where Iowa hasn't needed him that much. It's almost like he's a luxury, which is kind of shocking to where Iowa was a few years ago. So, from a team standpoint, it's a good thing. I mean, you've got a receiver that really looks polished. It looks like he's been well coached. He just hasn't, he's just still trying to learn the offense. He's trying to learn 3 different positions, the X, the Z, and the slot. And he's doing okay there. And so I think it's just a matter of time for him. I think he'll play at Michigan. I don't know how much. I'm sure he's probably shared some of the information with Iowa's staff and players, but how much? And I know, talking to a few of the players about that, they said, he's probably learned so much, or had so much thrown at him in the last few months, he probably forgot everything he learned in Michigan in the spring. And that's probably some truth to that it's kind of a binge purge when you get to that level. So I'm sure he's talked generalities, but I don't know about specifics about what the Michigan system brings. Maybe he knows a little bit here and there, but I do think he'll play. How much, though, I'm not really sure.
Scott, schematically speaking, give me 2 ways that Michigan is able to exploit Iowa, and then conversely how Iowa can exploit Michigan in this game for the people at home looking for something involving the matchup.
I would say offensively, if Iowa can run the ball at least 4.5 yards a carry, I think that's a winning number for Iowa. They've averaged 217 yards on the ground, but only one opponent really kind of is in a similar position as Michigan, and that's Iowa State. And they ran effectively, but not didn't totally dominate the line of scrimmage that day. So I think if Iowa can run the ball say 40 times at 4.5 yards per carry. I think that's what Iowa would like to do. I think they're capable of doing it, but whether or not they do it, it's going to depend on some of the external factors that you can't predict. Penalties, field position, even turnovers. So I think those are the numbers that Iowa probably would look for in this game. And then conversely, I think what could get Iowa beat is the lack of a pass rush. I mean, A.J. Epineza, everybody's kind of wondered what's wrong with him because he only has 1 sack, but most of that is that he's been double teamed in just about every straight drop back pass rush situation. It's been a tackle, it's been a tight end, it's been a tackle with a running back. Last week when Iowa did have a sack on one of his pass rushes, there was 3 people. It was, a tackle, a back, and then the guard kind of peeled off of an initial double team to watch him. So it's really about the other players. Can the other players step up? 2 Detroit kids, Chauncey Golston and Cedric Lattimore. Are they going to be able to cause, get some pass rush against Shea Patterson? If they can, then they can disrupt the passing game, because I think Iowa will Iowa's got a tough team to run on. And, if Michigan does it, it'll probably be more in spurts rather than, play after play. So I think if Iowa can get a pass rush, that'll be effective. But right now it's been a little bit underwhelming. And when you combine that with a secondary that's depleted against a very good wide receiving core, probably the best Iowa will face this year, I think that's the potential pitfall for Iowa, is not getting enough pressure on Patterson, exposing their secondary to some good wide receivers. So I think that's probably the one area that I'd be most concerned about with Iowa.
All right, I want to thank Scott Dochterman for coming on the show and giving us plenty of insight. Scott, you were our first guest, and that was only proper given our history as coworkers. So we will see you on Saturday, and until then, take care. All right, I want to thank Scott for coming on to the show. It was a great interview, great insight there.
Thanks, Scott.
Great insight there on Iowa and all things to know about the Hawkeyes before Saturday. Now we move on to our favorite segment of the week.
And now it's no longer just our favorite. You want to tell us a little more about that?
Well, now it's known as a little bit more than just Hail to the Spread. Now we're calling it Hail to the Spread, brought to you by the Action Network. If you're unfamiliar with the Action Network, download the app. All you got to do is look up Action on the App Store, Google Play Store, Android Store, whatever you got. Download it. It's free to download the app. Check out the lines, see how it's on there. They have the opens, they have the closing, they have the trends, they have all sorts of stats and analysis. Most important, when you get a subscription, which is called the Edge subscription, you're able to look at money percentages and betting percentages and are able to compare the two and look at the disparity so you can see where the money's at as opposed to where the public is at, which the money seems to always be a more valuable asset in deciding what you're going to wager on as opposed to the bet percentages. So, brought to you by the Action Network, we bring to you Hail to the Spread. Daniel, we're starting Florida and Auburn. It's in the swamp. I can't talk because I am under the weather.
We are starting big with Florida-Auburn.
Florida-Auburn. We're looking at the spread here like we did last week. We're doing spreads. We're doing totals. We're doing one per game with this game. Well, we do have a double feature this week, but we'll get to that.
Spoil it.
We'll get to that. Spread for this game is 2.5. Auburn is a road favorite. I love home dogs. I almost always love home dogs. And I love Florida's defense. There's a very strong chance this game goes under. But we had to give you a spread. We had to. And I love Auburn against the spread. They haven't lost against the spread in 6 straight games. 6 straight games. 6 straight games. Florida doesn't have Felipe Franks. I do not like Florida's offense.
Auburn's got a great defense, too.
Auburn's defense is immaculate. Bo Nix is far from being elite, but he has proven to me that he is good enough. I'm tired of betting against Auburn. I did it with Oregon. I did it with A&M. Or did I not do it with A&M? I don't know. Regardless, I'm not betting against Auburn. I got the Tigers 2.5 on the road. All they have to do is win by a field goal, folks. They hit a field goal with 30 seconds left in the game and a tie game, and they win. And you win. Everyone wins. Everyone's a winner.
Everyone.
Give me the Tigers.
Besides Felipe Franks.
Give me the Tigers. What about
who
you?
will be watching it from the sideline. I'm going to agree with you there. I think that it's really tough to ignore that 6 in a row against the spread. Gainesville's never an easy place to play, but I mean, if there's a team that has the build-up and the foundation to do it, it's got to be Auburn with that stout defense against a backup quarterback. I'm thinking they win this game by more than 2.5.
So before we get into the next pick, I want to talk to you about some promo codes for the Action Network. We got 2 different ones. 2, not 1, 2. Are you an annual guy? Do you like signing up for a membership and keeping it all year? 1 payment, 1 installment, and you're good to go?
I start as a monthly guy, and if I like it, I bump it up.
Well, we got one for you. If you're a monthly guy, Edge 10 gets you 10% off your monthly subscription.
10%.
10%. It's only $5.99 as is. You're a math guy. How much is that? Or are you not a math guy? Regardless, someone's about to find out how much it is.
59 cents.
It's not that much. It's
Well,
not that much.
60 cents. 59 cents and 9/10 of that last penny. Just missing the last little sliver.
So you're paying pretty much nothing to get an array of analysis, and they call it Edge for a reason, folks, because you're getting an edge on your action, which is literally the name of the app. You're getting unmatched analysis and news on every single game. Colin Wilson's a guy that I like to follow on there who breaks down a lot of good analytics and statistics, things that are profitable to bet against, such as the weather or a home dog or road favorites, etc., etc., etc. Believe me, this is worth it for, I think, the $5.30 that you'll be paying per month at 10% off using Edge 10. If you're an annual guy, you want to make
$5.40.
You want to make $5.40, whatever it is. You're an annual
Teacher.
guy. You're an annual guy. You want to make 1 payment and you want to call it a day. You've got money like that. When you got it like that, you're popping. That's how it goes. I understand. Edge 16. 16% off.
Edge 16.
16% off your annual subscription. Go get the Action Network. We benefit from it. You benefit from it. They benefit from it. It's a triangle of beneficial benefits. Edge 16 for an annual, Edge 10 for a monthly.
What kind of triangle we looking at? Isosceles.
Bermuda.
Right. Bermuda.
It's getting weird up in here.
You know what's going to get lost in the Bermuda Triangle? All the losses you would have taken without Action Network.
Oh, my God, that was a great sell. UCF Cincinnati, we're looking at a total. Oh, my God, I love Central Florida and their overs. They're bouncing back. They're off the pit loss. I love the Knights. Give me the over. It's at 61. Here's a weird thing. Here's a weird thing. Here's a weird thing. You ready?
I like weird things.
Cincinnati, when they play on Friday nights, 4 out of the last 5 have gone over. Cincinnati known for, Luke Fickell's a defensive guy. He's a defensive mind, former DC at Ohio State. But on Friday nights, things get weird. On Friday nights at 8 o'clock, things get weird. Central Florida, they love to score, and they love to score fast. They're 2 games away from that loss against Pitt. They scored 28 in the first quarter last week. They played UConn. They're made of Swiss cheese. But regardless, give me the over. It's at 61 right now. I like it up to 68. I don't care where it's at. Take the over.
I'm with you there. Speaking of the Bermuda Triangle, I think there's going to be a lot of defense lost in there down in Central Florida. Look, I mean, this is a game where you could see, quite frankly, 80 points scored. Wouldn't shock me if one team went over 50. Wouldn't shock me if the other finished over 30. I think this is a game where it's going to be offensive fireworks. And rather than holding teams down, it's going to be about, get that ball back to your offense and let them go to work.
Now we head down to Morgantown where couches burn and a coach is starting to cause a lot of stern because they're not very good.
And almost burn.
However,
His seat's
Texas,
burning.
So is Tom Herman's if they don't win this game. So we're not touching the spread because this is a weird one spread-wise. But I'll tell you what I am touching. What am I touching? What am I touching? 2 bad defenses is what I'm touching.
Ooh.
I'm taking the over at 60. Why? Because I'm a nutcase. And Sam Ehlinger is probably going to throw for a lot of yards. If Texas and LSU can go over, then Texas and West Virginia is going to the freaking moon. It's at 60. I like it up to 71.
I'm going to go under here. I think that
maybe not 71. Let me rephrase that. Probably 65 would be much more logical answer to that.
More responsible, per se.
That would be a correct assessment. All right, go ahead.
Well, I'm going to go under because I have faith in the Longhorns' defense. I think this is the week they get it together. I think it's the week where they maybe go into Morgantown and hold West Virginia under 20. Do you think Ehlinger has a big day? I think we could see something along the lines of 400 yards and 4 touchdowns.
I'm thinking Texas scores at least 48.
48. I was going to say, I think they've
I said at least.
Somewhere around the 35-42 range. And I think that they hold West Virginia under 20. Maybe West Virginia goes up to 25, potentially 30. Gut feeling says under. Gut feeling says this is the week the Longhorns defense looks like a defense.
Feels like a 48-21 type game, which would cover the spread anyways, but I don't want to touch it.
Yeah.
So let's go to our double feature. I'm really hoping Tad adds some sort of double feature noise.
Double Jeopardy?
Double, like, what's it called? Daily double?
Daily
My parents love Jeopardy. Maryland, which is weird because they're not even old. Everyone who knows me, I'm 23 years old. My dad's 49, and my mom's 39, so they're not old people. Also, yeah, my dad is kind of a cougar, I guess. So, Maryland, -12, Rutgers, bad. Love the -12 line. Why? Because Rutgers' first game with a new head coach, Nunzio Campanelli, Nunzio Campanelli, brother of Anthony Campanelli, Michigan linebackers coach, which has nothing to do with this game. I think he's more inspired with the players than Chris Ash, which is not hard to do. I believe that a stick could inspire a player more than Chris Ash. However, Maryland at -12 off a demoralizing loss to Penn State. Goodness, I think that think about it. Michigan was in the exact same situation against Rutgers last week. Same situation. Now, that being said, Chris Ash wasn't, holding down the fort, and that OC was fired as well at Rutgers, so it's a little different. But if anything,
it's worse.
If anything, Rutgers is trying to install a bunch of new things in a week's time, probably, because that's very Rutgers of them. So at -12, I love Maryland.
Yeah,
I love
for
Maryland.
a Rutgers player, that's got to be demoralizing to have your head coach fired after an away loss, not even a loss, an away drubbing, and then come back home and you got a new guy barking in your face and telling you what to do. You need more than a week to process that.
This is a double feature, but it also contains our lock of the week.
Lock of the week.
Is
Snap that shut. Seal it.
Maryland -12. This reminds me of when Iowa was favored by 20 against Rutgers, and I just dialed it up like speed dial in 2003. Also, the overs
they won that game by 30.
The overs at 56, and Maryland is pissed, so they're probably going to want to score as much as possible.
Maryland's going to score 56.
And Maryland's defense is also bad, so I think Rutgers might cook up something there. So 56,
like 10 points.
That's all they need, considering Maryland will probably score 30 by the end of that first half. So
they did in the first quarter against Syracuse. Or what was it, 28?
I loved unders last week. I hate unders this week. Give me the over. Moving on. Last one, and then we're wrapping things up, giving you predictions, and we're getting out of here. Ohio State, Michigan State. What did I just say? What did I just say that I hated this week?
I believe you hate the unders.
I hate unders. And this one is at 49. This total is at 49. This total is at 49.
Which Ohio State could score themselves.
And I hope Tad slows down my voice to like 49 on that one. So I love 49. I'm probably going to be wrong because this might end up being a weird game where Ohio State's like, oh yeah, how did we do that again? And somehow everyone thinks Michigan State looks good, and that's typically how these things go in the past. But I don't think that's how it's going to go.
Together before they play Michigan.
Because Justin Fields is unbelievable. Their offensive line is playing fantastic. Their receivers get in space every single game and just do unbelievable things. They have an insane running back tandem. Their defense is great. They have Jeffrey Okudah is phenomenal. Chase Young is an alien. He's not even human.
Yeah, that's...
If
a non-QB needed team winds up with the number 1 overall pick, that's your guy.
The only weakness that Ohio State has, maybe is its safeties. Maybe. So your best chance against Ohio State so far that I've seen is going over top. I do not think Brian Lertwerke is the guy that's going to go over top. Now, he has been better. So give him that. He has been better. So do I think MSU wins? No, God, no. Do I think they score a few points? Sure, because if there's one thing Mark D'Antonio can do, it's inspire a team for a big game against a rival like Ohio State. This is a game that I see Ohio State scoring a lot, though. Indiana exposed the stout Michigan State defense last week. I don't think that Michigan State locks it down a week following that. I think that
I'm with you.
They're a bit... It's been grueling. It has to have been grueling.
A lot of film being watched in East Lansing this week on the defensive end, I'm sure, when you get exposed by a no-name quarterback who a lot of people didn't even know was going to be the starter going into East Lansing last week. But Penix had a great game. his credit.
This feels like a 38-13 type game. Michigan State scores a touchdown and hits 2 field goals. Ohio State scores enough to win. They don't look unbelievable in the game. They don't look unstoppable, but they still win. They still control the game. 38-13 is my score, and I'm not as confident in that score enough to make a spread pick on it. But I'm confident enough that both teams will muster up those points one way or another. And I like the over. It's at 49, and I like it up to 51, 52. Mm-hmm. I think that's comfortable.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to go out and make a spread pick. Right now it's at, 20.5 for Ohio State?
Yeah, it's stayed there. It's opened at 20, and I think it stayed there. It might have moved to at 20
hovering around half a point, but
I think that's not enough movement to really analyze anything.
Right. I think the Buckeyes cover.
Really?
Yeah.
That's huge.
I do.
But it was big last week on the road at night, college game in Nebraska, and they absolutely demolished Nebraska.
I was going to say, I'm going to take your 38-13 prediction a step further and go, I think Ohio State wins this game maybe 42-17. Maybe.
Fair.
I think it definitely is going over, but I think Ohio State is going to win this thing by maybe 4 scores, maybe a bit more than that.
All right, that was Hail to the Spread. It was brought to you by the Action Network. Remember, annual subscription you can sign up for with Edge 16. Get 16% off your annual subscription. You want to go monthly? Perfect. That's fine. Edge 10, you get 10% off your monthly subscription. Again, that benefits the pod, which we appreciate. Again, we've gained listeners each show. We've kind of increased our audience one by one, which is great. I mean, and you want to see more and more. You don't want to see less and less. Our first show wasn't like crazy hot by any means because we did announce the day of and release the day of. We didn't want to have this huge build up and delay anything. Yep. We wanted to put it out there when we had it and continue it. We think we've been consistent. We think the show has gotten better each week. It's become, obviously we're in the heat of the season. Daniel has different beats. Daniel has class. I have job. So the preparation has become much more of a second nature type thing, more so than a concentrated each day discuss type deal. But we're still working. We're starting to get our interviews in now. Like I said, we wanted to spend the first few weeks just building our chemistry.
And it's going well.
Yeah. So we appreciate you guys tuning in. Tell your friends, tell your parents, and continue to tune in. But before we go, we got to talk a little bit about Michigan and Iowa and discuss what we think.
Why would we do that?
Is going to happen. Because they're playing on Saturday. Duh.
Saturday at noon.
Homecoming.
Parents' weekend.
Kanye West. I hope Ted plays Homecoming in the background. Oh, no, I forgot. Kanye is very copyrighted about his music, so we probably won't get Homecoming. But maybe if he just did like the
rather explicit,
like the drums for like 3 seconds, just for like 3 seconds, and then it went away.
Do you think about me now?
So that's actually how it goes.
Do you think about me? Yeah.
That's cool. We don't even need the music now. You just did it, so that's perfectly fine. That's all we needed to hear.
That was as much as it sounded like Kanye in the background.
It was actually you.
It's Daniel in the foreground, in the flesh.
So Michigan, Iowa. This is Grit Show, Grit Nation, formerly, because Michigan has now, quote-unquote, modernized our offense, so it'll get a little wacky on the other side. But Michigan, Iowa, Kirk Ferentz, the king of Grit Nation, the man who is very strict to his methods, very strict to his ways, punts at midfield. Love the guy, full of passion. I like the Hawkeyes this year. The Iowa State game, the fact that Iowa State lost because it ran into its own player on a punt return was amazing, and very much so the most Iowa thing I've ever seen. Now, here's the thing. I'm not a huge fan of bully ball in the classic style of football, but I'll tell you what, Wisconsin did it and absolutely obliterated Michigan. Say what you want about Jonathan Taylor and how much he had to do with it, but Wisconsin was putting spellbacks in there, and they were just eating Michigan alive. And Michigan very much so kept their ones in. It wasn't like Michigan had folded over and put in their twos. Now, to say they'd given up, I think that's fair, because I think they did in the third quarter. But this team's at home. It's homecoming. Michigan's always been a very good team at home. I'm going to spiel for a second here and give you what I think is the big difference here. And I'm going to let you dive into more of the game plan, X's and O's, and how this game will be controlled. But I'm gonna jump into something, and it's more of a trend, but it's something that really stood out to me about this game in researching it. And I wrote up on it briefly on the Wolverine Lounge on, I believe it was Monday when I did my Monday column. Again, WolverineLounge.com, thewolverinelounge.com. You guys can always read us. We do Sunday columns there, Monday columns there, and really dive in, and then throughout the week have some other stuff from media availability. And in my Monday column, I wrote about this, and it's something that really, really stood out to me about this game, and it's really convinced me that one team in this game is going to win. I'm never really convinced on this, when it comes to big games for Michigan. I'm always a really big toss-up guy. I usually have trouble picking one or the other. The Michigan-Wisconsin was a game where we were like, I have no idea what the hell is going to happen. And then Michigan got demolished. Michigan-Iowa, I've convinced myself that Michigan's going to win, and here's why. This is one of those spots where Michigan always shows up. They're at home. They're a small favorite against a mid-tier top 25 team who's good but hasn't shown that they're, unstoppable. This reminds me a lot of Wisconsin and Penn State last year. It reminds me a lot of Wisconsin and Penn State in 2016. Michigan would go on in opposite years to get destroyed by Wisconsin this year on the road. In 2017, lose to both Penn State and Wisconsin on the road then. However, at home the very next year, it went the complete opposite. Do I think this game is going to end up like those games where Michigan just dominates from the first snap? I mean, it could. I would not be surprised if Michigan... I would be more surprised if Michigan dominates this game than if something different happens. If something along the lines of Iowa dominating this game, that would surprise me much more than if Michigan were to dominate this game. And I've convinced myself Michigan's going to win just because these are the spots that Jim Harbaugh teams show up most at Michigan. Jim Harbaugh's Michigan usually doesn't let down in these type of games. This team is much more talented than the 2017 team. The offense has shown much more potential than the 2017 team. The quarterback is much better than John O'Corn and Wilton Spade and Brandon Peters, in my opinion. Well, Wilton Spade, I think he was good when he was healthy, but uninjured Wilton Spade, like in 2017. Michigan's a small favorite at home against a team that isn't a rival. And this is against a mid-tier top 25 Big Ten team that isn't a rival. Each time they've had that opportunity, Wisconsin 2016, Penn State 2016, Wisconsin 2018, Penn State 2018. Each time that's happened, they've dominated. Do I think they dominate again? Maybe. I think they win by 10. That's my pick. I think they win by 10. I think that's fair. But again, I would not be surprised if Michigan wins by 17 plus in this game solely because of that trend. Matchup-wise, this is different. I think Scott made a great point in that Michigan has a very good opportunity to dominate the secondary of Iowa because it's depleted, hurt, not doing very well, lost its top safety to the NFL draft. Its pass rush hasn't been what it's expected because it's very easy to double-team Epineza and force the other edges and the interior to create its own pass rush. And they haven't faced the best offensive lines. This might be the best offensive line Iowa's faced. On the opposition, I think that Iowa doesn't have a Jonathan Taylor. That Mekhi Sargent's good, but he's not a Jonathan Taylor. Nate Stanley is good, but where Nate Stanley can attack Michigan, I think Michigan's can counter with a solid secondary, especially with more Dax Hill out there at nickel, which should, in turn, you would think and you would hope, compensate for the crossing routes that typically hurt Michigan most. So I like Michigan. I like Michigan not just because of that trend. I do like the matchup, but that trend is very, very, it's standing out to me in this game. Because at home, against a small favorite whom isn't a rival, is where Jim Harbaugh's Michigan plays its best.
Yeah, and I'm with you there with Michigan winning. You touched on it a little bit, but where I think this game will be won or lost for both teams will be if Michigan can build off the passing game success from last week. If Michigan looks as comfortable as it did with Gaddis on the sideline, obviously the home crowd is huge with that, big factor. I really think that if Shea Patterson can really step up in this game and take advantage of that weaker Iowa secondary, I don't want to come out here and call it weak. It's going to be a whole lot better than what he saw last week. But if he can go out and exploit Michigan's clear athletic advantages with the highly touted trio of Donovan Peoples-Jones, Nico Collins, Tariq Black, I think that Ronnie Bell is going to have a speed advantage in the slot. I think that they could bring in some of those freshmen that they gave experience to in last week's third and fourth quarters. Giles Jackson looked great. Cornelius Johnson saw the field. I mean, these are guys who they can contribute now. There's just so much talent in front of them. And if Shea Patterson can put that talent to use, that's where Michigan wins this game. That's where Michigan's offense keeps moving That's where you see speed and space. Heck, they had a play last week where they set up a wide receiver screen to Donovan Peoples-Jones, gave him 4 or 5 yards of space, and he took it for 17. That's the speed and space. You let these playmakers do their jobs, I should say. Nick Eubanks had some fantastic catches in wide open spaces. They're doing a great job getting him into the flat, getting him 10 yards up the field into the sideline. And he'll sit there, and Shea will deliver a good ball. Like, those are the plays that go so much further than just their yardage from a standpoint of confidence. And if they can do that against a team that's ranked 14th in the nation, I think it's going to be pretty telling. So, either way, my takeaway, this is going to be telling, whether it goes really well or it goes south. For both teams, quite frankly. My final score prediction, something in the neighborhood of maybe 31-20, 30-21 Michigan. I think we'll see something in that range, maybe that 7 to 10 point margin. I do think they cover the spread, which is now down to what, 4, 3.5?
3.5 at time of taping.
All right, so there you have it. Brett and I both think that Michigan wins and covers.
And what are we thinking on the total? I mean, we got to give the people the total.
What is the total listed at right now? I think that we both said something around the 30 to 20-ish range.
Well, here's the thing. My final prediction is that I think Iowa's offense I think it struggles to get going. I think both offenses might initially struggle to get going off the rip, just because this just seems like a game where it's going to be a lot of feeling out, a lot of what are we going to do when we go out. Scripting wise, I feel like both teams are going to heavily script their first drive. You saw that happen with Wisconsin. Michigan heavily scripted those first couple of drives.
Yeah.
And
did they think Ronnie Bell would go for 68 yards on the first play? No.
No. So the
Ben
totals,
Mason still came in for that second one.
The total's at 47.5, meaning you really only need a 28-24 type game. A 24-21 game is under. This game I feel like Michigan, if it plays its cards right, meaning if it passes the ball a lot, puts up 31. I think Iowa, with its very strong offensive line, is able to put up around 21, maybe 17, maybe more. 47.5 is a really good line. Credit to Vegas. It's a very good line.
Credit to Vegas.
Public is at 65% on the under. Shout out Action Network. I'll take the over. We love overs this week, so we might as well take another one.
Overs. The thing is, it's easy to see Michigan having one of those Wisconsin last year, Penn State last year games where they just figure it out and run with it. And there's no stopping that freight train once it gets going. And quite frankly, with Gaddis on the sideline for the second week, we could see a freight train on offense if things go well from the start.
So what's your over here? Or I'm sorry, what's your final score here?
30-21 Michigan.
Well, that's really weird because I was just about to say 31-21. So we've got very similar final score predictions here at Hail to the Podcast because we are on the same page. Thank you for joining us for Week 6 and Episode 6 of Hail to the Podcast. I am your host, Brandon Justice. Remember, we are brought to you by Big Heads Media and presented by the WolverineTheLounge.com. And we got a sponsor for Hail to the Spread known as the Action Network. Remember, Edge 16 or Edge 10.
You know what else you need to remember?
What's that, Daniel?
If you hail to the victors,
then you'll probably hail to the
podcast.
See you next week.